So, long story short, ZenQuest was this thing that Kickstarter did every February for 3 years in a row, where they promoted RPG zines, whether they be standalone games or RPG supplements. It grew year after year, but in January of 2022, they announced that they would be moving ZenQuest to the month of August to coincide with Gen Con. I don't really have any strong opinion on that move, except that they announced it super late, less than a month before ZenQuest 4 was supposed to kick off. In response to the move, some folks in the indie RPG world established Zine Month to take place in February anyway. But instead of just being on Kickstarter, it will be zine-length RPG projects being crowdfunded on Kickstarter, itch, as well as independent websites. Zine Month, or Zemo, has its own website where you can check out all the entries, zinemonth.com. It may not attain the same high profile as Kickstarter's promotional thing, so I'm doing my part by putting out this video to highlight some projects associated with Zine Month that I'm personally interested in. I'll leave links to all of the projects below, so here we go. The first is Signal to Noise by Craig Duffy of Lunar Shadow Designs. This is a 2-player letter writing RPG that simulates communication between someone on a generation ship traveling to a nearby star and someone who's staying behind on Earth. In the course of play, you draw cards that determine just how your messages to each other start to digitally degrade due to the widening distance. One of these ways of degrading comes in the form of finding and replacing letters in your message before you send it to the other player. Actually, Signal to Noise is already available on PDF, but Craig is raising funds on GameOnTabletop.com to get a print version of the game made. I mentioned this project at the top because I think it's becoming increasingly important for people to know that there are crowdfunding platforms for RPGs besides Kickstarter. Sites like Game on Tabletop are small, but if you give them oxygen, they could grow into healthy competition for Kickstarter, in which case we as the creators and backers win. Lichdom is a solo journaling game by Adrian San Juan, where you play as a sorcerer who descends into darkness as they pursue immortality. You draw cards that are themed either mundane or arcane and subdivided into violent and social, and sort of define the world around you as you describe your own journey into darkness. There's a way of dying in the game, but you can use dark spells to keep doom at bay, for a price, of course. I'm pretty excited about the presentation of this game, and it will run a bit long for a zine at over 100 pages. The game will use a standard deck of cards, but there will be the option to get a themed deck, aptly called the Deck of Doom, in one of the reward tiers. Knights of Lazarus is a pretty strikingly illustrated mothership supplement written by Marco and Stefan Serrano of Spicy Tuna. Illustrations are by Arkvane and Jedze Nika. The idea is that your players are on the ship Canterbury, which acts as a space dungeon where combat is best avoided. Each of the enemies is specialized and requires a careful choice of weapons whenever possible. This project feels pretty baked, with 5 color maps, 5 NPCs, 6 unique enemies, and a culture of space knights that the players can aspire to join. Barkeep on the Borderlands by W.F. Smith is a 52-page full-color zine that describes 20 different bars with their own patrons, encounters, drinks, and other details, rules for a pub crawl adventure run as a point crawl, rules for drinking and inebriation, and 5 factions. This project actually has a lot of collaborators attached to it, and some of them are pretty big names in the OSR space. I think the most exciting prospect of this game, for me, is to be drinking while playing it. The Mall is a horror adventure module described as the thing in a 90s mall. So think gross out cosmic horror entity in a mall. It's by Sam Lee of Goblin Archives and is a module attached to their Liminal Horror game system, which is a sort of open source horror RPG based on the RPG Karn. I'll link the SRD below as well as the itch page where the mall is being crowdfunded. I'll be curious to see how well the module emulates the feel of a mall. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 90s mall in my opinion, because malls really haven't changed that much since the 90s. But there is a distinct sort of soullessness to malls generally that I'm hoping that this module will capture, as well as a huge potential for weapon and device improvisation. The Royal Cartographer is a cooperative world-building RPG for 3 to 5 players. You use a deck of cards, some dice, and maps to resolve a description of all the sections of a regional map. One of the players is the Royal Cartographer, and the rest represent local cultures or factions. You each take turns describing an area in terms of local lore, but conflict arises when the Royal Cartographer wishes to characterize or redefine features, areas, or landmarks. I've only seen the alpha version of this game, but I think it has a lot of potential to be a fun social RPG that explores some pretty real-world historical problems with colonialism, and just the way humans deal with each other in a cartographical context. Axion Library is a collection of 4 zines, all licensed for old school essentials and compatible with BX and all of its clones. 3 of the 4 zines are already available as pay-what-you-want printable pamphlets on DriveThruRPG, and the 4th zine will be added exclusively in this Axion Library compilation. You'll finally get all of these useful tables to run a classic OSE session. This includes an alternate arcane magic rules system, tables for what happens to a PC when a player misses a session, and an alternate divine magic system, among other things. So these are just 7 of the many projects I'm looking forward to seeing develop in February for the first annual Zine Month. There are a lot more projects that I haven't mentioned in this video, only because there wasn't enough artwork to showcase, or I still have some questions about the design. But for the most part, it's just too many to sift through at this point, which is a good thing. You can keep up with all of the projects associated with Zemo at zinemonth.com. I've left links for all of the projects that I mentioned here. As always, thanks for watching. See ya.